Wait a minute. Whoa. Are we recording? I didn't know we were. I'm not. Okay, look, I'm not in costume. I have not gone through all these cookbooks yet. Can I have some time? I mean, I think the audience deserves to see a professional production here. How much? 8 seconds? All right. Theme song? Hey everybody, it is episode 3 of our series on paragraphs. Every body is beautiful, every body paragraph, that is. Now, what was I doing with all those cookbooks? Well, each of these cookbooks has a recipe in it for apple pie. And if you don't mind, I've only got, 6 of these. I'd like to read you all of those recipes. So starting with Betty Crocker's new cookbook. This is pastry for 2-crust pie, 1/3 to 2/3 cup sugar,
1/4 cup all-purpose flour, 1/2 teaspoon ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon ground nutmeg, salt, 8 cups thinly sliced peeled tart apples, 8 grams of butter, 1 45 pastry, 2 mixed sugar, flour, cinnamon, 2 extra flour,
bake 40 to 45 minutes or until crust is golden brown and done. That should yield you 6 servings. Now, the reason why I wanted to read you 10 minutes worth of recipes is because I wanted you to see that even though each one of those recipes is different, they all do 2 things. They all contain the same basic ingredients. So, there's apples, there's flour, there's sugar, there's cinnamon, and they all follow the same format. In other words, the directions to make an apple pie are given to you in an order that will result in an apple pie. This relates absolutely to writing body paragraphs. There is no one right recipe for a body paragraph, but every recipe for the body paragraph uses the same ingredients, and every recipe for a body paragraph follows an orderly structure. Now, just as a reminder of the things that we've talked about up until this point, a paragraph, including your body paragraphs, exactly 1 idea long, and when you're thinking about those body paragraphs, they have to be apt. Okay, they have to be thoughtful of who the audience is, what your purpose is, and it has to maintain your overall tone. There are, and I'm going to put this right here, there are 3 basic organizational structures to an essay that you can choose from. And which structure you choose depends on the kind of essay you're trying to write. There is a chronological structure. That means that you're telling things in the order that they happened. Every one of these recipes, every one of these recipes is written in a chronological structure. Now, I know I talked in the last episode about the in medio res opening, right? Where your beginning doesn't have to be the beginning, the introduction that you write doesn't have to start at the beginning of the story. Even when you do that, you've got to keep in mind an overall sense of forward motion, that you begin in the middle, but then you have to take a step back to the beginning and explain how you got there, and then you get to the end. The second organizational structure is spatial. You're not going to use this one very often, but when you are describing a place, or when you are describing a multi-dimensional thing, like an actual object, like if you're talking about a piece of art, you would want to have a spatial organization in your paragraphs. The third, and by far the most common when you are writing academically, what you were going to do in high school, what you were going to do in college, you're going to use order of importance, which is exactly what it sounds like. You are organizing your paragraphs by what ideas are most important. And you have 2 ways to do that. You could start with your least important idea and build toward your big idea, your most important, your most persuasive idea at the end. Perfectly legitimate way to do it. Most of the time, though, the other way is what teachers like to read and what is actually more effective, where you make your claim and then you start with your best or most important evidence. And then, you work your way to your least important evidence and then your conclusion. It is actually really, really important that you have some kind of organizational structure, because, and this is a difficult thing for teenagers to understand sometimes, you as the writer, you know something that the audience doesn't. If you're writing an apple pie recipe, you know how to make an apple pie and your audience doesn't. So using a systematic approach where you reveal in a series of concrete steps how to make the apple pie makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, if you just are providing random pieces in no particular discernible order, your audience is just going to be completely lost until you get to the end where maybe you've revealed what it is you're trying to say. One of the things to keep in mind about any of these structures, chronological, spatial, and order of importance, is that your essay is kind of like a fractal. If you've ever heard of a fractal, you know what, I'm just going to display, this is the Wikipedia entry for a fractal. But the short version is a fractal is a pattern that no matter how magnified you get on that pattern, it's made up of little versions of that pattern. So you start with the large version of the pattern, and then you go in and to find one piece of that pattern, but that piece is exactly the same as the large pattern. And then you go in and you find that the smaller piece is exactly the same as the little piece, is exactly the same as the big pattern. What I mean is, if you're going to do order of importance from one paragraph to your last paragraph, you should do order of importance within your paragraphs. And I want to show you an example of that. John Roberts, he's the Chief Justice of the United States. He's in charge of the Supreme Court. He recently delivered a commencement speech. He spoke at a graduation ceremony. And I'm going to put this paragraph nice and big up on the screen. All right, so what I want you to see about this body paragraph, first of all, he starts with a pretty clear topic sentence, right? He says, commencement speakers typically wish you luck. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you why. He lets you know right away at the beginning of that paragraph what that paragraph is going to be about. But then watch what he does. He goes through different reasons why he doesn't want to wish the graduates good luck, and he does it in order of importance. Take a look at what his first reason is. He says, I hope you will be treated unfairly so that you will come to know the value of justice. Now, I'm not in John Roberts' head. I didn't call him up and ask him about this. But what's his job again? Yeah, Chief Justice of the United States. He is in charge of the Supreme Court. Don't you think the most important thing to him would be justice? A sense of justice that develops within every American? Or at least everybody in the graduating class that he's talking to? Absolutely. And he covers a bunch of other things. Let's look. And then he gets down to the end. I hope you will have just enough pain to learn compassion. Now, I don't want to say that any one of those things is unimportant. And I don't want to get political, but I'm guessing that John Roberts put these things in this order on purpose. Maybe you don't need as much compassion if you've got a strong sense of justice. And I want you to take this paragraph as a model. By the way, I don't think I said this at the beginning, I am linking down below to this speech, and all of the examples that I'm going to talk about in this episode will be linked below. Not the cookbooks, these live at my house. Now, we've covered these things, that you can go chronological, you can go spatial, you can go order of importance. We've covered how there are a lot of different recipes, but I haven't actually mentioned any of those recipes yet, and I would like to do so at this time. First of all, before I go anywhere else, I want to put in one more plug for TheySay, I Say, this fantastic little book by Graf and Birkenstein. I'll put a link to it below. There is so much in that book that you can learn about writing in an academic way. One of the most common recipes that you might hear about in school, read about on the internet, is known as MELCon. I'm spelling it out here for you below, and you can see that there's a lot of capital letters, which means it's probably an acronym, and it is. MELCon stands for main idea. So the first thing you're going to put in your body paragraph is the main idea of that paragraph. Then evidence and link. This is kind of important. And we'll talk about this more in the argument series, being able to link your evidence to your main idea or to your claim. But after you've stated the main idea in your paragraph, you want to show some evidence of it, and you want to explain how that evidence connects back to the main idea. And then concluding sentence for that paragraph. I want to put up a couple of paragraphs by a writer named Ta-Nehisi Coates. Okay, these paragraphs are actually the second and third paragraph in an essay that, again, I'm going to link to it below. It's about getting better at difficult things. And he's talking in particular about speaking French. And so let's take a look at these two paragraphs. So he says, here I am right now in a Montreal hotel. I spoke French at the border. So after establishing in his first paragraph that learning French has been difficult for him, he goes into that with some examples. So the main idea here, the idea that he's trying to get across, is that he is now in Montreal, which, for those of you who don't know, is the French-speaking part of Canada. He's in Montreal, he's speaking French, and look at the evidence that he provides. He says, I spoke French when I checked in, I spoke French when I went to get lunch. I don't really believe in fluency, if there is such a thing. I don't have it, he says. I mishear words, I confuse tenses, I can't really use the subjunctive. And he feels out of it. He feels like he doesn't have the fluency. Look at his last sentence in that first paragraph though. Yet. We've seen this a couple of times so far in this series, where writers end their paragraphs with a single word sentence. It is a great, great tool to keep in your tool belt. So the first idea is he's imperfect at French. He hasn't got all the French he needs to fully understand what is happening around him in Montreal. Take a look at his second paragraph though. Something has happened to me, and that something is this: I have gotten better. In this paragraph, he switches to a different main idea, which is, I feel like I'm getting better. Now look at his evidence for that. His evidence is places where he's tried to learn French. Okay, I didn't feel it this summer at Middlebury, despite a difference in my entrance and exit scores. I didn't feel it when I first arrived in Paris in January. Okay, so he has not felt the getting better until this. I felt, as I always feel, like I was stumbling around in the dark. I still feel like that, but I also feel like I am getting better at stumbling. So his main idea, he's getting better. His evidence is that he doesn't feel like it's perfect, but he's getting better at the stumbling. So two ideas, two separate paragraphs, and evidence and link in each one. Now, one other thing that I want to point out, I realize that this is the series on paragraphs, but I want to talk about his sentences for a second. Take a look again. The first paragraph takes up 4 lines, and it has 10 sentences. The second paragraph takes up 5 lines of text, and it has only 6 sentences. The amazing thing, and I don't know if he's done this on purpose. Again, I'm not in his head. I didn't call him up and ask him. So I don't know if it's an unconscious part of his writing or if he's doing it on purpose, but it's fantastic that when he's describing being bad at French, he's using a lot of really short, unfluid American English sentences. When he's describing getting better, his sentences get longer. They get more complicated. There are more pieces to them. They are more fluid. It's a beautiful way of fractalizing within the paragraphs what he's talking about. And that's just good writing, people. It's good writing. But let me tell you about another common recipe that you might see on the internet, and that one is called CEL. C-E-L, again, spelling it out for you, so you know it's an acronym. And CEL, unsurprisingly, stands for Claim, Evidence, and Link. So in your body paragraph, you're going to state a claim, you're going to provide some evidence for that claim, and then you're going to link that claim to the evidence. You're going to tie those things together. And I want to put up a piece of writing from one of my favorite people in the world, John McWhorter. He is a linguist, and someday when I grow up, I want to be just like him. And this is from an essay. You can see it, it's scrolling there. I will also put a link to it below, about why English is kind of dumb. That when you look at our language, it's not good. And what I'm giving you here, let's make it large. I'm showing you the introductory paragraph to that essay and a body paragraph to that essay. And the reason why I'm showing you both the introductory paragraph and the body paragraph is because of all the examples, this one by John McWhorter is probably the most like what you would write in school, in terms of he has an academic-y kind of thesis that he needs to provide evidence for, so that at the end of the essay you're convinced that his thesis is true. So take a look at that introduction. He brings it down to the thesis: English is not normal. Okay, pretty straightforward thesis. Now, if he were writing it for school, you would expect each of his body paragraphs to explain one reason, one idea, why English is not normal. So let's take a look at this body paragraph that I pulled out. More weirdness, okay? All right, that's a little bit of conversationalism he's using to keep his essay feeling informal, but the next sentence really does provide a main idea for that paragraph. He says, there's exactly one language on earth whose present tense requires a special ending only in the third person singular. I'm writing in it, I talk, you talk, he, she, talk, s. Why just that? And now listen to his link. He says, the present tense verbs of a normal language have either no endings or a bunch of different ones, and then he gives Spanish as an example. So his claim is that English is weird because of this one characteristic. He gives some evidence of that characteristic in action with I talk, you talk, he, she talks. And then he links it by saying there is no other language in the world because every other language either does this or that. Now that's a fairly short idea to put into one paragraph, so McWhorter actually sneaks in another piece of evidence. Look at where he goes after that. He says, try naming another language where you have to slip do into sentences to negate or question something. Do you find that difficult? And then he ends by naming the few other languages in the world besides English where that has to happen. So again, another piece of evidence that English is weird. Specific example of it, do you find that difficult? And then the link that there are so few languages in the world that are like that. There's one more common recipe that you're going to come across in your English classes or in your other classes or on the interwebs. It's called the power paragraph. Here's what it might look like. The power paragraph takes 4 things. I'll blow that up for a second. All right, these are 4 things that should be in every paragraph. All right, it numbers them 1 through 4. Number 1 being the topic sentence. Number 2 being a major detail. Number 3, I like to, when I talk about a power paragraph, I like to talk about number 3 being an explanation for the number 2. And then number 4 is a concrete detail that supports the major detail and explanation. So once again, I'm going to show you a paragraph from the literature. This is written by a woman named Katy Vine. This is a story about a guy in Texas named Sandy Jenkins, who over the course of a few years managed to embezzle tens of billions of dollars from a bakery. Just really fascinating story. You should read it all the way through. But I'm pulling out this paragraph, and I'm going to blow this one up so you can see these things in action. I'm going to actually number them, 1, 2, 3, 4. Are you ready? So this, the very first sentence is a 1. It's a topic sentence. But the monotony of the day would soon intrude. So we know what we're talking about in this paragraph is how boring Sandy Jenkins's days are. Monotony means the same thing over and over again. So now Vine has to provide us some evidence. So let's look at the next sentence, which is a 2. A major detail, colleagues stopped by his office to ask him for reports. And then she goes into a 3 by describing the different kind of reports that there are. Payroll reports, daily sales reports, reports on how many pounds of pineapple and pecans they had purchased. Yes, just reading that out loud. So she's establishing that monotony. And then she gives a concrete detail. The sentence after that is a 4. Listen. Motioning to Sandy through the window, partitioning their offices, Sandy's immediate supervisor in the accounting department, Scott Holloman, always wanted something, bank balances, invoices. So the specific detail, there's always reports. Here's one. Sandy's supervisor is always demanding them. Okay, so we got a 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the nice thing about the power paragraph, and then the same thing is true, by the way, for MELCon and Cell, is that you can repeat portions of it. So you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, but then go back and do 2, 3, 4 again. And even 2, 3, 4 another time after that. With MELCon, you can do MELCon. Or with Cell, you can do Cell, right? You can repeat those things within a paragraph. That's in fact what John McWhorter was doing. He was giving an evidence and a link to, and an evidence and a link. So 2 of those within his Cell paragraph. So we come back to a 2. Take a look at this. Scott was a good boss, like a brother, actually. So if our number 1, our topic sentence is monotony, then a second important detail is that Scott's boss was okay, but do we get a sense that Scott's boss is exciting and fun? No, not at all. Because let's look at the number 3 that follows. Still, his friendship was little reward for the number crunching drudgery, and there's more. Sandy worked at the bakery for 6 years. He proved himself reliable, but he only made $50,000 a year. This is the reason why Scott, being a good boss, not enough. And we have our concrete detail at the end of the paragraph, our 4 at the end of the paragraph, which should not surprise you. I already told you this guy turns out to be an embezzler, tens of millions of dollars, is this. He was having to save money just to afford the upgraded Lexus he wanted. Okay, first of all, bro, you're driving a Lexus. You're living a good life. You're making $50,000 a year, right? You should be happy. You should be fine, all right? But he wants this upgrade. He wants to be fancier. And what I really like about this paragraph is that this paragraph throws in a kicker, right? So we end not with that concrete detail of he wants the upgraded Lexus, but we end with this kicker. This is a beautiful, beautiful piece of writing to end the sentence. It all seemed so tedious. Tedious, if you don't know what that means, it means boring. It's a nice callback to the topic sentence that Vine wrote talking about monotony. So after a 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, she kind of goes back to 1 as a kicker in her power paragraph. So let's bring it back to the cookbooks for a second. A professional baker doesn't open up Betty Crocker every time she wants to bake a pie. Professional baker has baked enough pies that it's all here. That's how you should be as a writer. By the time you get to the end of high school, by the time you're in college, You should not have to think about 1, 2, 3, 4 power paragraph. You should not have to think about MELCon or MELCon or MELCon or SELCon. You shouldn't have to think about that. You know, John Roberts didn't have order of importance taped above his computer monitor while he was writing that commencement speech. He just knows, as a writer, that that's how you write. So, body paragraphs. Yeah, you can use a recipe. And I've talked about some, I've showed you some examples of some, but one last thing about them. If you are out to eat and you taste some fantastic apple pie, do you go home and look at your Betty Crocker? No. You get the recipe from that chef, from that baker. So when you read, and you read fantastic body paragraphs, don't think, this is a terrible thing because it's not a cell. I'm never going to be able to use this as a model. No. Imitation is the sincerest form of learning. When you're reading and you see great body paragraphs, keep them. Use them as models, as mentor texts. I mean, that's how I came up with the examples that I'm using now, right? I read these great paragraphs and I was like, I'm going to use these paragraphs as mentor texts for my video series. And that brings us to the end of episode 3. Episode 4 is going to be all about conclusions. So I'll see you for the next one. This is food from Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart, right there. She's got an apple pie recipe. It goes something like this.